And now we bring on Mr. Josh Hill, fan-sided editor extraordinaire, for our weekly segment, A Song of Dan and Josh, where we go through the Song of Ice and Fire novels one chapter at a time, dissecting them, analyzing them, and adjusting the camera. All right, Josh, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, Dan. How are you doing? And hello, everybody. How are all of you doing? That's what we're always concerned about.
It is, and I think... Oh, hello, Josh, says Julie. You really won everybody over. Oh, and Kenny is going to see 2 of my panels. Great.
Oh, there you go.
At least one person will be in the audience. I'm nervous about that.
Only 2 of the panels?
I am nervous. I'm not going to lie.
It sounds fun, though.
It does sound fun.
To be a part of a panel. Because like when you go to those Comic-Cons and stuff, everybody's rushing to try to get to the panels. Yeah. You're what everybody's rushing to try to get to.
See, so that's pressure. It's like, I don't like that position.
Cool. That's how you've made it.
Like,
that's how you know you've made it.
What if I fail everyone? I also just found out I got to interview, which is exciting, Hannah Murray, who plays Gilly, which is great. But I'm not going to lie, Josh. I'm also a little freaked out. Like, she's a TV person.
It's true. You should exclusively ask her questions about skins, and that's it.
Did you ever watch Skins?
I did.
Oh, I should consult you then. You should. If you have any Hannah Murray questions, if anybody has any Hannah Murray questions, let me know. What do you want to know from Hannah Murray?
She was also in that Detroit movie. Detroit,
Oh, didn't that fail? The one about the riots?
Yeah, that's for another day, though. That's a rant for another day.
Tonight, I'm going to watch all of Skins and Detroit just to prepare. And then I'm not going to get any sleep. I'm just going to, like, stumble in, like, punch drunk and not do anything.
Last thing on that, I think Skins, I remember watching it because I was like, oh, that's the girl from Game of Thrones. Gilly. And then Gendry's in it, too.
Yeah.
So I was like, wow, look at that.
And he's also there at Con of Thrones. So right. Skins reunion.
Skins reunion.
They should have a panel for that. They
Skins
don't, though.
Con. Oh.
Skin Con. Anyway, why we're here today is to talk about A Song of Ice and Fire.
Indeed.
But seriously, I am just kind of working through my own therapy thing here about Con of Thrones, so, you know, you're welcome. And today we read an important chapter.
Yeah, a good
He says,
one.
ask her about Season 8. I will. Yeah, Daenerys 5, a very important one. By the way, also a little preview. I'd like to just do one chapter next week because I'm consumed by Con of Thrones. Yeah. So just let me do one. Okay. So, what happened in this chapter, Josh?
It is the infamous eating of the horse's heart.
It is the infamous eating of the horse's heart.
Stuff, and also...
And the infamous execution of Viserys Targaryen via molten gold.
Yes, he found out it was at the end of the rainbow. The pot of gold was not what he wanted. It's not what he thought.
That is a good tagline for something or other.
Yeah, and the chapter started just like right...
It did.
Got straight into it. It was like Goodfellas. I was like, she's just eating the heart. Right. It's like, you know, all my life, I always wanted to eat a horse's heart. And it goes back and tells her story. But no, I did like that.
Yeah,
kind of jumping
this
right
chapter
into
begins right as Daenerys is chomping down on a horse heart. Maybe I'll even read the first line. Why not? The heart was steaming in the cool evening air when Khal Drogo set it before her, raw and bloody. Mm-hmm. So just right there, we jump right into Daenerys eating the horse heart, which is all. I mean, it's not like a new literary technique, but it's always a good one.
No, it was striking though, because it was.
You thought so?
Well, yeah, because I've read chapters that start like that, you know, in the middle of
in media res.
In media res.
If you want to get Latin with it.
Yeah. But I've never started a chapter like that where the action is somebody consuming a horse's heart. So it was kind of, that was the stunning part of it where I was like, whoa, we're just diving right into this, which is good because it kind of set the tone for the chapter.
It did. Which it was an eventful.
Yeah,
things are happening.
Eventful and violent chapter.
I mean, my big takeaway from this chapter, I mean, obviously Viserys' death.
Yeah.
But it really kind of distills what made Viserys a failure and why Daenerys succeeded. I think the horse heart incident is kind of the key to that. Mm-hmm. Like, that's gross. Yeah. It's ridiculous. But she's doing it.
Yep.
Like, Daenerys throws herself into this. Like, she runs down, like, her prep.
Yeah.
Like, her pregame. She drank blood, clotted blood for weeks beforehand to get herself used to it.
Yeah.
She ate raw horse flesh. What else did she do? She practices her victory speech beforehand. She was starving herself for a few days. Like, you know, you go in for one of those doctor visits.
Yeah.
So she could be sure she could keep it down.
Yep.
Like, she was preparing. She was taking it seriously.
Yeah.
And what happens? She succeeds. She keeps that horse heart down.
Yeah.
Sure, it's a weird kind of success. I mean, we don't all want to succeed at that. But she knew it was important to earn the Dothraki's trust. And she was willing to put in the work, and she did. And she gets rewarded. And then we have Viserys, who is the complete opposite.
Other end of the spectrum.
Yeah, he I mean, they point out in this chapter, he still doesn't know the Dothraki language at all.
Yeah.
Which is kind of his downfall, because if he did, maybe he would have heard them saying, okay, get the gold.
Yeah.
But he didn't. He's still in his, his kind of royal rags. He's never worn what the Dothraki wear. And they emphasize that. He said he was wearing his scarlet silk, soiled and travel-stained. His cloak and gloves were black velvet, faded from the sun. His boots were dry and cracked. His silver blonde hair matted and tangled. A long sword swung from his belt up the scabbard. And, of course, crucially, he's carrying a weapon in Viserys Dothrak. And Martin mentions, did you catch that, just how many times he underlined, you can't carry weapons in the sacred city. Yeah. It is forbidden.
Yep.
You can draw no blood here. I mean, reading this time, I was like, he really pounds that home. I mean, because he has to, because it's set up for the end. When Viserys walks in, has a big old sword, and it's like, well, obviously he's not paying attention to the rules.
No, and he has a bloodless death.
He has a bloodless death.
Well, I imagine. I don't know what goes on under the molten gold, but
yeah, I'm not sure like how many instances of that you can really compare it to in like history. What are your thoughts on that? Did you have any empathy for Viserys at the end? Could he have avoided this fate?
I mean, he absolutely could have avoided the fate. I had zero empathy for him whatsoever, because it was we talked about this before. How many different times did he have a chance to assimilate himself into this culture, to become one with the Dothraki and kind of support his sister? I think I don't know if things would have ended much better for him, because I feel like even if he would have inserted himself into it the way that Daenerys did, I think he maybe still would have been viewed as a threat and as an outsider, and I'm not sure he would have been accepted.
He wasn't married to the call or anything. He didn't have an in.
But I think maybe he could have played the game a little bit longer if he had played it better. He just kind of came in shooting from the hip and didn't really know what he was doing, didn't bother to learn any of the traditions, right up to the end with carrying the weapons into the sacred city, not learning the language. It was, no empathy whatsoever.
On the other side, I think it makes us like Daenerys more, because, I mean, who doesn't like a hard worker? Who doesn't like someone who's willing to put in the work and do her homework and, like, get rewarded for it, get respect? So it's a good chapter for both of them for very different reasons. What do you think of the moments, and this is on the show pretty much beat for beat, where Daenerys, beforehand, even up to the end, she's still kind of in Viserys' camp. She's like, I mean, he's my king. If he wants the dragon eggs, he can just ask, and I would give them to him. And then it all changes the instant he threatens her baby, where he says, I will cut this out of you and leave it for Drogo, but you're coming with me. Then in her mind, even, it switches to her brother, Viserys. He's my king. She starts calling him in her head this man who had once been her brother, and it goes very cold and very distant. It's pretty great.
I like that. It was the switch. Yeah, that was good. Again, I feel like I say this every single week, but in the book, I felt it a lot more than I did on the show, because you're watching the emotions switch, and it's a little bit easier to pick up on the cues visually when you're watching it on the show. Where here, when you're inside of her head and you feel the switch and you see the switch, and it's like, oh, she's done. She's completely cut. He's shut off. He's cut off. So yeah, I liked it.
It worked. I mean, I think it worked on the show too. Just
it's
a different way.
It's
just
different.
Because her face goes all blank.
Yeah.
I mean, it really was adapted. Like, this is pretty straight.
Yeah.
But just what struck me about the narration is what she calls him, this man who was once my brother. Like, he's not even using her name anymore.
Yeah.
And it was that 1 second. And again, it's the thing of the setup, where it was emphasized earlier that she was still in his corner. But once you flip that switch, it's like there's no one flipping it.
Yeah.
So she watches as he gets his arm broken. And even at the end, where they have this kind of narration about his death, the sound Viserys made, when that hideous iron helmet covered his face like nothing human. His feet hammered a frantic beat against the dirt floor, slowed, stopped. Thick globs of molten gold dropped down onto his chest, setting the scarlet silk to smoldering. Yet no drop of blood was spilled, and yet she doesn't have any reaction.
No. That was brutal, too, the description. Like,
you think?
Yeah, it was. I wasn't expecting it. Like, I knew it happened, but I wasn't expecting to kind of have a little bit of a gut wrench like I did. Just like the description of, it wasn't so much of the gold, the molten gold. It was him, the thumping of his feet, and I was just like, ooh, yeah, that's very visceral. It's.
I mean, part of it is that unique. Like like you said, I can't think of anybody else eating a horse heart. I can't think of anybody else being killed this way. So kudos to Martin for A, finding a unique kind of death, and B, describing it in a visceral kind of gut-punchy way. Julie says he got what he deserved.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think there's much debate there.
No.
All right. Let's talk about a couple other... That's the main, ticket item from this chapter. But there's some other stuff, too. How about Daenerys and Drogo? I'm going to read a little passage here about when she's eaten the horse heart. Daenerys looked at Drogo whenever she felt her strength failing, looked at him, and chewed and swallowed, chewed and swallowed, chewed and swallowed 3 times. Toward the end, Dany thought she glimpsed a fierce pride in his dark, almond-shaped eyes, but she could not be sure. What was interesting to me about them is that, on the show it's pretty clear. Like, they seem to work somehow. And I guess they work here, too. But it's still a situation where they really can't talk. Like, and he is this, large, terrifying man making her eat a horse heart sitting in front of her.
Yeah.
Like, do you get the... What's your impression of their relationship just from the text?
It's tough.
I'm not sure she knows.
No.
So I don't know how we're supposed to know.
No, it's like that scene, that little interplay specifically was like weirdly sensual in a way where it's like she's vying for his approval and he's giving it to her, and it's like, but they're still so distant. And it's this weird, literally like the metaphor of her eating a horse's heart to like signify her love and to signify her, like acceptance,
devotion
of
to this cause.
His devotion and acceptance of his culture,
her commitment.
It's such a weird thing, and I think that's so fitting for their relationship because it's such a weird, odd thing to try to literally digest, and it's like, and I liked it. It was a good kind of back and forth because I do feel, and it's on the show too, but here more so because they can't talk. I feel like they're more deeply connected.
I do too.
So, and I kind of got that here with like the subtle things, like she's looking for him when her strength is kind of waning, and that's like
because it's a gross horse heart.
Yeah, well, and like he's her rock and that kind of thing, and that was like a George R. R. Martin's way of like being like, "Aw," in the middle of somebody eating a horse's heart. So
yeah, it works. Yeah. I mean, I like the idea of the horse heart being a metaphor, kind of for their relationship. It's weird, it's a little obscene and gross, but somehow it's right. Like in a weird way. Yeah. He also has sex with her in public after she goes into the lake.
Yeah.
And that scene is like 2 sentences. Just sex is done. So she's used to that too. She's really thrown herself into the Dothraki culture.
Yeah.
Public sex and all.
Well, that's why I liked like the looking back and forth with the horse's heart thing, because that to me is more meaningful than any kind of like the physical connection that George R. R. Martin's trying to show us, because it is a deeper kind of thing for the two of them.
It really is.
That's why I like that, where it's like the sex stuff is kind of a throwaway, whereas this is more of the bond between them. And it's like, oh, okay, this isn't just, he's marrying some like, random teenage girl. This is something.
They actually do have something.
Yeah.
It's good because, I think it's easy to overwrite love stuff. Like to just... If you access somebody's thoughts, you can just say like, "Oh, he's so handsome and I love him and I'll worship him forever."
Right.
Like I think it's harder to convey that deep sort of emotion in this kind of smaller, offhand, grazing the subject, but not really getting to the heart of it way.
Yeah.
So yeah, I applaud him for that too. It was a good chapter.
It was a good chapter
in terms of his writing.
It was, the horse's heart, and then it was, when Harry met Sally. I don't know which one which one conveys better, but it's 2 different things.
Agreed. Okay, bye, Julie. She has to go, but we'll see you next week.
See you, Julie.
One other thing I want to talk about before we sign off is prophecy. The prophecy has a weird place in these books and on the show.
Yeah.
You'll see this later, but it plays a much bigger role in the books and on the show. They have some on the show, but it's kind of like,
Yeah.
We get one of them here, and the fans like to talk about the prophecies on Game of Thrones. What do they mean? Who do they apply to? Do they apply to this person, that person, this person? We get one from the Dosh Khaleen, the ancient crones of the Dothraki here, when they talk about Daenerys' son. I'm going to read it out loud. As swift as the wind he rides, and behind him his Khalasar covers the earth, men without number, with arcs shining in their hands like blades of razor grass. Fierce as a storm this prince will be, the bells in his hair will sing his coming, and the milkmen in the stone tents will fear his name. So she's talking about Daenerys' son, going to be born, going to lead this big Khalasar, and get the guys in the stone tents, which are people in castles. I guess a couple of questions for you. A, could that apply to Daenerys herself? Because she does go terrorize the men in stone tents. She does lead a huge Khalasar.
Yeah.
And I guess just, are you intrigued by that question at all? Because some fans read a lot into this kind of thing.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of talk about, well, this could apply to Jon Snow, this could apply to the Hound or Daenerys or anybody, yada, yada, yada. What's your take on, I guess, the use of prophecy as a narrative device in this one in particular, or in general?
I mean, it's tricky because it's like, prophecy is naturally a MacGuffin. It's like, I don't know if it's
right.
actually meaningful to the plot, if it's going to turn out to be something, or if it's just a case where it's, prophecies are misread all the time, and is it just here to kind of lead us in one direction? It's like, just kidding.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the old horror thing where, the killer isn't anyone but one of the main cast. It's the supermarket clerk that you saw for 5 seconds at the beginning of the movie, and it turns out he did it all. So it's like that kind of thing where it's like, I don't know how much this means, but I do appreciate how much people put into trying to figure it out. Because I could see how this applies to Daenerys, because
totally.
She
leads a Khalasar,
and she's a child. So like, this is, if you're applying it to her child, she herself is still a child. So that's kind of that's where I would go with that. And I guess Jon Snow is a child as well, so it could apply to him. So I can see where people are going with these things, but I don't put too much stock into the prophecies, just because it's like, unless there's serious evidence to be like the RLJ thing.
Well, yeah, that's more of a theory.
That's a theory. So like, I lean more into the theories than I do the prophecies, but there is like a Venn diagram where they kind of meet in the middle a little bit.
No, I hear you. I feel like Martin does it on purpose. He puts in a lot of prophecies in these books, and I feel like there are almost so many, they're meant, like, they can't all be true.
Yeah.
So they kind of overlap, and fans maybe put a lot of weight into them just because they are, they're natural road marks.
Yeah.
You want to know the answer to the mystery, the answer to the question. But I guess we can talk about that more as we get into more of them down the line. Oh, Dan Turton quotes, "Prophecy is like a treacherous woman," a quote from A Feast for Crows.
Oh.
There's no follow-up to that. Just imagine the rest of it. I think there is, but I forget what it is. Any other thoughts about this chapter, Josh?
No, it was a really solid chapter. It
was a rollicking chapter.
Did feel, like you said, very closely adapted to what we saw on the show. It is an important chapter, so I don't feel like I would have felt weird if they had changed something or take, because it's like everything that happened lines up perfectly with where the story is going to go. So there's some things like in the Ned chapters and the Jon chapters that it's like, okay, I can see why they cut this out, or condensed it into two things into one, or two characters into one character. But this was pretty close.
Which is that last bit with Viserys' death. There are small changes. Like in the books, I was reading like, oh, there were 1,000 people in the hall. Yeah, like, which is just, you're not going to have that on TV. So in the show, the scene is like, it's in a hut like the size of this room, or even smaller. And it's like 25 people around there. But of course, they cut out the public sex. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I think Viserys watches the horse heart thing. But yeah, mostly very, very faithful. Anyway, next week, because Con of Thrones is just dominating my life right now, I think we should just read one chapter.
One chapter.
And then we'll pick up the pace after that. The next one is an Eddard chapter, like always. And we'll reconvene next week at Con of Thrones. Hope to see anybody who can get there.
Yeah.
And join us next week at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time for more Game of Thrones news, more Song of Ice and Fire news, and more of A Song of Dan and Josh. Thanks for watching.